You want to start with the huge news at Microsoft?
Ooh, the Microsoft
Since we're
news.
talking about the failures of the Secret Service, it kind of segues really nicely into what's happening, the latest news that happened over the weekend, essentially, or Monday or Tuesday at Microsoft. And we wanted to maybe talk about those implications, what that means for gaming, because, Microsoft owns a big portion of your gaming life now.
So yeah, Microsoft DEI team lead, the guy who's the head of the DEI team, blasts the company in an internal email after the team is reportedly laid off. So the DEI team was laid off. It's no longer business critical, is what this guy's accusation is. That the necessity for having diversity is no longer important for business for a giant global tech conglomerate. And
Wait, how hard do you think it is to have a diverse global tech conglomerate? Like, you have to work pretty hard at being diverse. Like, that's actually something you need to put your mind towards, instead of just the whole global part just kind of isn't diverse enough for you.
I mean, I know that anytime I make a phone call to any one of these companies, I'm definitely speaking to someone who's diverse from me, for sure. There's no way I'm speaking to another ginger on the other end of the phone about how to, restore my files or whatever the heck is going on.
I think we should file a complaint. What is the level of ginger representation at Microsoft customer service?
That's right. Red hair and blue eyes were possibly like the rarest kind of human. So technically, we should really
be prioritized right up there.
I'm just saying.
With soulless ginges.
Oh. So anyway, the Microsoft is reportedly shuttering one of its diversity, equity, and inclusion teams. One of its DEI teams, one of its teams, according to an internet email sent by the team's leader to a significant number of Microsoft staff last week, in which the lead also accuses the company's executive leadership investigated and evidence discriminated harassment and toxicity. Oh, geez, Louise, that's a lot of big words there, buddy.
Oh my goodness.
The email, corroborated by IGN, was sent by the former lead of the DEI team. In it, they state that their role and team were eliminated due to changing business needs. IGN understands that the individual and a second person in the team were both laid off, was not able to reach the sender. Hold on, where is my... The email goes on to assert that DEI programs are in danger, not just at Microsoft, but across all businesses. Unofficially, in my opinion, this is probably still the lead guy, not specific to Microsoft alone, but conservative policy plan Project 2025 looms, and true systems change work associated with
Of course
DEI
they
programs.
have to go there. So they have to go with the Project 25, which is such a hocus. It's such BS. So Project 25 is just like a white paper, I think, from Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is a nothing college with no influence on anything or policy. They just write white papers and then convince conservative kids to go to their college rather than get brainwashed at a liberal arts school, so that they end up becoming a transgender Antifa fascist communist activist. So but they don't so they wrote a white paper and now it's the agenda. It's a freaking weird college somewhere. I don't even know where it's at. Someone tell me where Hillsdale College or Heritage Foundation. Same thing, man. The Heritage Foundation has not been effective at pushing any kind of agenda since since its existence.
It's a beautiful scare tactic, and it's been they're doing a great job putting it out there so that people know what it is and can be scared about it. But I don't think that's obviously not what we're dealing with here.
So I'm wondering though, is this a good sign? Is this a good sign for things to come in video gaming and tech? Because I think a lot of the reason why so many of our games are so terrible right now is because they've prioritized diversity. And the thing about diversity is it's only counting diversity on the outside, which is very bigoted and racist to judge people on their,
Yeah.
Their
are you hiring people that don't have an education? Because they have a very different culture. That would be very diverse. If you hired somebody who didn't have an education in what you're even involved in, how about that? Why don't we
Or
just
how
hire?
about hiring some really competent conservatives? You know, they're not doing that, and that would be diversity right there. You would have people that think differently, because I think it's vastly more diverse for having people think differently. Like they always say, like, oh, our founders were all white, straight males. It wasn't very diverse at all, except it was, because all those guys, it's like you had a Quaker, a Unitarian, a deist, another deist, a Baptist. You had a Catholic, you had all these guys that were involved in the founding of the country, and while they were from Europe, and they kind of maybe looked a lot alike, they thought vastly different, hence why they argued and debated, and it took a while for us to figure our crap out to get the country on the right track and get a constitution and a bill of rights and yada yada yada. So like I would love diversity to go back to that, like diversity of thought, diversity of maybe even lived experience would be fine.
Because a person with a completely different skin color than you or I could have the exact same culture and extremely similar upbringing that you or I could. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily just the color of the skin. Now, granted, that's not a sweeping statement or anything like that. Granted, there are vast differences in the cultures for various.
Like you and I are completely different and nothing alike at all, and I don't ever want to be But I think it's also good. So could this be a trend? I think this trend's going to take a while to catch up with the government. We saw some DEI this weekend. It might have something to do with the failures that happened on Saturday, and why Trump was allowed to be on the stage speaking whilst a guy was climbing a roof with a rifle, because maybe they're focusing on diversity instead of competency.
Everybody saw what was going on and nobody did anything, and you're like, what?
And then that makes me think, like, is this really why there is a wage gap? Because that's the thing, is like they're trying to close too, is like, oh, diversity. Because like, I mean, really, if you want to explain the wage gap in an image, you could just look at this image here of this Secret Service woman hiding behind the man she's supposed to protect. And that is the perfect graph for the wage gap that exists in the United States.
Oh man.
I'm just saying.
Oh my God.
These are the questions that I ask, like I wonder at times, is all I'm saying. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not like, again, like I think that like a lot of times people get out on me because they're like, oh, you don't want women in the workplace, you just want them at home making babies, making sandwiches. I was like, yeah, I mean, that's a really good place for a woman to be. However, I've worked with a lot of capable women that are incredibly talented, incredibly intelligent, incredibly capable. And I liked working with them, and I enjoyed working with them, and having them on the team did bring a lot to the team, and a lot of advantages, because you could have someone that thinks very differently than you, because women do think very differently than men most of the time. And you could bounce ideas off them and check in on like things. And like, especially if you have a demographic where you're like, in my case, I was in marketing and advertising. I wanted to understand, like, hey, we're making something that's for women and men. Like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So I'm like, but I still like to make jokes, and I still think at the end of the day, women would be happier raising their babies and making sandwiches for their sexy husbands who love them and cherish them and take care of them. Not the jerky guys, though. Don't marry the jerky guys.
Not the jerky guys, ladies. Not the jerky guys.
Get good at picking men, okay? That's my advice. The Quiet Part podcast. That's a great point. It's like, so when I worked in entertainment advertising, I would work alongside, like, I was a creative director. I'd work alongside women that were creative directors, and the women all made more than the men. So this whole like wage gap idea, like when you did apples to apples and oranges to oranges, women were making more, because I was in Hollywood. I was in a very left-wing market. Women just had an easier time. They got to work less hours. They got to take more time off, and they got paid more simply because they were women, and we had to promote diversity. And I don't think that it actually helped. It helped relations in the office. I think it actually created more animosity and mistrust, because the expectations for women are lower than they are for men. And then they're getting rewarded at a higher rate. So this whole DEI stuff that's been happening for 20 years in the entertainment industry, I hope starts to die off as we see Microsoft and other companies realize it was a big mistake.
And again, we both totally see the necessity for different points of view and what many would call diversity within the workplace. But requirements and things that go above and beyond, giving someone who deserves the job. Like, it's it's absolutely crazy what's happening right now in the job
Yeah.
marketplace, where you have 10 people who are overqualified for a job, and none of them even get responses.
Yeah.
They don't even get talked to. The people that they're going for, like, they're aiming for a specific person who may not even be qualified for the job sometimes. And I don't have receipts for this right now, but I have spent 2 years just painstakingly looking for a job, and with Emmys on your resume and
Yeah.
nobody even responds. You're like, what?
Emmy award winning producer for the show Extra.
Not like I'm super talented, but still, you'd figure at least that would elicit a response.
Yeah, or just open the door. But the problem is that so many of the HR departments have taken over recruiting responsibilities, and the HR departments are just 100% chock full of, the of toxic feminist women who have an agenda, and they're pushing that agenda, and the agenda isn't necessarily aligned with the company even, or hiring the best people for the job. It's about, I mean, it's such a game, and it's like I actually help a lot of like guys with their resumes, and how to like change the language of the resume in order to get past that first idiot in the HR department. Because let's be honest, HR department is a department for people with no marketable skills, who are the busybody gossips in high school, who are working really, really hard to make their life matter by demeaning and demoralizing the company, and also creating a lot of drama, and just being really manipulative in general. They're, what they are is the HR department is the mean girls, and they have no marketable skills or really that great of intelligence. And that's what we're dealing with in corporate America. And it's starting to show, and hopefully, again, this is like the beginning of signs to come, where we're just going to hire based off of merit and ability, and not high school BS, DEI BS, like any of that. Flip City Magazine has great advice for you, though. Like, legally
Wow.
change your name to Shaquanda to get callbacks. I mean, just that's not a
You can
bad idea.
could you DBA?
Yeah, Andrew Campbell says Nepos are back, baby. See, this is the thing that people don't realize, is that
Oh,
DEI is not a response to it's not a response to white privilege. White privilege is a myth. It's a myth. What it's been in corporate America, what it's been in the entertainment industry, it's been nepotism all the time. It's not like, dude, no corporation's hiring a white guy from Appalachia with a high school degree. Like, they're hiring someone's cousin, they're hiring someone's son, they're hiring, like, I
They're
mean, I
hiring
would,
someone's cousin from Appalachia.
yeah, exactly. But they're not hiring just some random guy. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times you get that young guy in the office, and you're like,
What is he
how did
doing
you
here?
get this job? You're going to school for what? You have no marketable skills in advertising. Oh, but his mom worked at Sony, and therefore she wanted her son to get a job at our ad agency, and then so our ad agency can get a Sony contract.
Dude, when working at Extra, since then, this I'm not necessarily spilling any beans, because this actually came out in an expose article that was published by like a TMZ competitor. But the nephew of our executive producer came to work for us, and we were like, what? Because he didn't, let's just say, he didn't seem to have any marketable skills, but he sold like vintage clothes online, and he was like super into like fashion and whatnot. He Most of his time was spent going to Britney Spears concerts and shooting iPhone video that we would then put on the show. Is he would get paid to go to Britney
Yeah.
Spears concerts, and he would lose his mind because Britney Spears was his everything. As those are his words. His words.
Mr. First World says, or asks, is knowing people inherently bad? Not at all, but I would say that
No.
in our experience in entertainment, in the entertainment world, it starts to become annoying and frustrating, because you start working with a lot of incompetent people that don't know what they're doing, that got there, and then you can't, like a situation I had. We hired a guy at our ad agency, literally was the son of a president at a studio, and we had a relationship with that studio, and she was giving us work, and so we had to hire him, and he was totally pointless and a waste of space, but we couldn't get rid of him because we would lose that contract and that business and then probably have to lay off more people. So that's the problem that I have with knowing people, is that, and that, like, we see Acolyte is chock full of nepotism, and it's terrible, and there's a reason why. So it's like I'm fine hiring someone that, like, everyone ends up getting a job because they know somebody, but it's like, can you do the work? You know, like, they should still be able to do the work. And all I'm saying is that DEI is more of a response to the nepotism than it is to white privilege, because white privilege, again, is a complete myth. It's always been nepotism. If that answers the question.
It's one thing. It's one thing to get through the door. It's one thing to get somebody through the door, to get somebody a meeting, and that's a gift.
Yeah.
But it's another thing for somebody who was not only given a meeting, but like still has no seemingly, attachable skills to whatever it is you're doing. And they've still been, not only are they not doing it well, but they're still working there, and now they're going to move them to a different department. Maybe they can work it out there.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're not trying to find a place for this person. They're not working. Why do you keep just trying to shove this square peg into circular holes?
Yeah.
That is what it felt like a lot of times, because there are people that would know somebody or knew somebody or were someone's cousin, and they came in the door and you're like, oh, well, this guy seems like he was born to work in television. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course, it has nothing to do with the fact that he knew somebody. He was going to end up in television anyway. But there are some people that have no business being in the industry at all, and they just sit and they wallow and they just absorb a paycheck. That's somebody who could be producing such much better and more incredible content, regardless of what it is. They're just sucking that up, and it's the nepotism is the thing that irks you.
Yeah, I think, and then Mr. First World following up, thanks, man. And thanks for being here, dude. Maybe a distinction can be made between reputation and family ties. And I think that distinction is like, I've gotten jobs because I've known somebody, but then no one ever questions that, because I'm just doing the work, and I'm talented, and I'm working hard, and I'm there till 8 o'clock at night, busting my hump. And so no one even wonders why I got that job. Because of that. And that's how you kind of like fight against it. But again, we at the Salty Savage Show always promote meritocracy.